Registration for the 2023 AFCA Convention is now open. Join us as AFCA returns to the Queen City. Mark your calendars for January 8th through the 10th, 2023 in Charlotte, North Carolina. If you are attending the convention, dues, fees, and ticket requests not received by December 10th will be processed on-site at a higher convention fee and ticket price. For more information, visit afca.com.
This week on Inside the Headset, we are featuring Sonny Dykes, head coach at TCU, the number 3 seed in the 2023 College Football Playoff. Coach Dykes discusses his coaching path, recruiting philosophy, and some keys to building a winning program. Now, let's get inside the headset with Coach Dykes.
Can't tell you how excited I am to be here. It's really an honor and a privilege for me to have an opportunity to come to speak to all of you at the National Convention. This is just an unbelievable event. I've had a great time being here. I had a great time with my coaching staff last night watching the national championship game. We had about 30 of our coaches and staff members, and we got together last night and watched the game. And you know, what a great culmination to a fantastic college football season. That was a really fun game to watch last night. 2 outstanding football teams and 2 teams that clearly deserve to be there. So again, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you being here, and it means the world to me to have the opportunity to talk to you. What I wanted to do is talk to you briefly about a couple of things. I turned 50 years old this year. For many years, I can remember being in coaching staffs in the room, and I was kind of one of the young guys in the room. And then all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're the old guy in the room. And so one of the things I want to talk to you about, just some things that I've learned through the years that I think are really important. You know, the question that I probably get asked more than anything else by coaches is tell me about how you got in the business. So I'm just going to give you a quick little summary of what happened to me early on and how I got in and what I've learned along the way that I think is pertinent and important to any kind of success that I've ever had up to this point and hopefully moving forward. You know, I didn't play college football. I was a very average high school football player, was a little bit better of a high school baseball player, had some opportunities to go play a little higher level in baseball than I did in football, so I ended up doing that. Went to Texas Tech. Had a great experience, played for a legendary baseball coach there, Larry Hayes, and really learned a lot from Larry. Then I decided at that point I really wanted to get into college football, or to coaching really, and I wanted to be a high school coach. My dad was a college coach, had been at Texas Tech, and was a high school coach for many years as well. I wanted to go someplace and stay. That was the biggest thing I wanted to do. I wanted to take a job at a high school, work my way up, stay there, and eventually maybe become the head coach. And I was tired of moving around, and that was kind of my goal. Well, that's not exactly the way it worked. I took a job at Monahans High School out in West Texas and did it for a year. Went to Richardson Pierce High School in the Dallas area, did it for a year. After that, I decided I really wanted to get into college football. I tried to be a graduate assistant. I applied literally to every single Division I university in the country, and probably half of the, at that time, 1AA colleges in the country, and did not get a reply, didn't get a job, didn't get anything. Got in my car, drove around, saw people, didn't get a job. For really 3 years, tried every avenue that I could possibly do to break into college football as a graduate assistant, and never could make it happen. Went to Navarro Junior College. I thought that might be the next logical step to try to get into college football. Did that for 2 years, lived in the dorm, you know, what most of you guys have done, made $4,000 my second year after I got a raise. You know, was really excited about that. Felt like I was making $188 a month after taxes, and I was kicking ass, you know, felt really good about where I was. Got free meals in the dorm, you know, and they had a CC's Pizza Buffet. It was $2.99, I think, at that time, and it was a heck of a deal. So did that for a couple of years, and had an opportunity at that point to go to the University of Kentucky and work with Hal Mumme and Mike Leach. Okay, so when I went there originally, I was going to be a defensive graduate assistant. Was just fortunate enough where it worked out to where I moved on the offensive side of the ball, and then I got to be part of the change of college football. You know, Hal went to the SEC, came from Valdosta State to Kentucky, and really implemented the air raid and changed everything. I was Mike Leach's GA in 1997 and had just an unbelievable experience there. And so really got to go with Mike to Texas Tech in 2000 and got to be part of a coaching staff that, you know, Dana Holgerson coached the inside receivers and Art Browse coached the running backs and I coached the outside receivers, and Cliff Kingsbury was our quarterback and Lincoln Riley was a student coach and Dave Aranda was a graduate assistant. Sonny Dykes was the offensive coordinator at TCU, was there. Graham Harrell is now the coordinator at USC, was one of our quarterbacks. So we just had all these guys that love football. You know, we had all these young coaches that are young players that love the game. And so we used to sit around the office all the time. You know, student coach Dave Aranda or GA Dave Aranda talking to student coach Lincoln Riley and just sharing ideas. And Mike Leach created an environment where you felt comfortable sharing ideas and you felt comfortable talking to other coaches on the staff. And it was a great environment to grow in. It was a great environment to learn in. And we had a great experience and an awesome time and won some football games along the way. And I learned so much from that experience. So I guess I'm telling you that just to let you know. People ask me all the time, how do you break in? And the way I broke in is I actually did a pretty good job at Navarro Junior College. And Hal Mumme took notice of it and offered me a job at Valdosta State. And I ended up staying at Navarro, but calling Hal a year later when he went to Kentucky and saying, hey, how about that job now, Hal? I'll take it. And so that's, I think, the key to being successful and the key to moving up in the business is really two things. Number one, do a good job where you are. You know, work your tail off. People notice. It doesn't matter what level of football that you're coaching. People will notice when you work really hard and you have success and you do it the right way. People take note of that, I promise you. The second thing is, and my dad told me this, and I never really understood what he was talking about for years, and at some point I figured it out. You know, don't worry about where you're coaching, worry about who you're coaching with. That was the thing that I always thought about. He'd say, you know, it doesn't matter what label you're wearing on your shirt. It doesn't matter what the logo is. It matters the people that you're with, the people that you surround yourself with. If you're with great people, you're going to learn great things. Those people are going to be successful. You're going to learn how to be successful, and at some point, you'll be successful. And so I think those were two lessons that were really, really important for me as a young coach. And look, you know, I've had my ups and downs in my career. You know, I was fortunate my first time as a head coach to go to Louisiana Tech, and we had a level of success there. Then I took the job at Cal, and it was a tough place, tough job. I didn't do particularly well. Got fired, had to get back, came back to Texas and worked for Gary Patterson at TCU, which was a great learning experience for me, and then was fortunate enough to get the SMU job and was kind of in the right place at the right time. But you've got to keep hanging on. You got to keep grinding. You got to keep believing that if you do things the right way, good things are going to happen, and you can't give up. You know, I think the great lesson is you look at the players in college football. The last 4 Heisman Trophy winners, 3 of them were guys that couldn't start at their school. Baker Mayfield couldn't start at Texas Tech, so he left. Kyler Murray couldn't start at Texas A&M, so he left. Joe Burrow couldn't start at Ohio State, so he left. All 3 of those guys won Heisman trophies, won national championships, you know, had a great level of success, and the great lesson for all of us is, you know, they just hung in there, they persevered. They found the right fit. And the older I get, the more I realize how important fit is. All right, so I'm going to get to my lecture here. Okay, for me, I think keys to success, when you sit down and you look at your situation, you're going to have strengths and weaknesses. Every single job you have, every one of them is going to have certain strengths and certain weaknesses. And sometimes some of the jobs that you think are the very best are some of the most difficult. You know, there's a level of expectation that goes along with that. Okay? Example, I get the La Tech job. Okay, I'm excited about it. I've been recruiting Texas my whole life. Louisiana Tech is adjacent to Texas. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into Dallas, I'm going to go into Houston, and we're going to recruit all these kids to Ruston, Louisiana. Well, the thing I realized pretty quickly was they weren't coming to Ruston, Louisiana. They weren't going to leave Dallas and come to Ruston where they didn't have as good facilities as their high school. And so we had to figure out a different method on how to recruit guys at that point. We had to take our plan and we had to adjust it to make it fit our situation. Okay, from there, we figured that out. It took us about 18 months. We go to Cal. The Bay Area is a unique culture. It's very, very different for me. I had to find some guys that could recruit California. And culturally, it wasn't a great fit for me. All right, so learned how the importance of fit really at that institution. Okay, went to SMU. Okay, get to SMU. It's going to be a challenging situation. We have to sit down. We have to address what are our strengths. Our strengths are we're in Dallas, Texas. Okay, there's great high school football in Dallas, Texas. Great high school coaches in Dallas, Texas. So we've got to figure out how to get kids in Dallas to stay. Well, that's hard to do on the front end when your program hasn't had a lot of success. So the thing that we decided to do at that point, well, let's try to get them the second time. The transfer portal was starting. We took 22 transfers, I think, when it was all said and done. We had 90 players that were new to our roster over the last 2 years. 90 players in 2 years that were new to our roster. So we had to figure out how to make all these guys work and all these players come together, fit our culture, assimilate, do the things that we need to do to be successful. So we use the transfer portal, and that's our biggest strength. Is kids want to come back to Dallas. They may get recruited by somebody. They go to that school. Some of them have a great experience in grad transfer and come back. Some are unhappy, whatever the case may be. A lot of them are just homesick and want to come back. And so we've welcomed those kids back, and it's given us a chance to be successful and probably jump-started our program a little bit more quickly than we thought it could. So I think that's really important. Evaluate where you are, determine what your strengths are, determine what your weaknesses are, play to your strengths, and then address the challenges. That's something that is a institution. Every single job is different. Every one of them. And so figure out what your strengths are, figure out how that can benefit you, and then try to always figure out how can we fix our weaknesses and how can we get better. For me, I think one of the things that I think is really critically important is you have to have total staff alignment. And what I mean by that is my job as the head coach every single day is to set the culture. Okay, to set the culture. I have to walk into a meeting room every day with 40 different people that have 40 different motivations, that have all these different ideas about what success looks like, have all these different reasons that they're either happy or unhappy, and I have to try to figure out a way to keep them focused, keep them working together, and I've got the most incredible coaching staff and support staff really in football. I mean, we do an unbelievable job with our creative staff. It's one of the best things that we have going for us. It allows us to get into recruiting student athletes that we probably wouldn't have a chance to recruit if those guys weren't so good. And it's a way for us to get our brand out and sell our culture, not only to high school kids, but to our fans and to the city of Dallas. And they've done just an unbelievable job of doing that. And then I've got a group of coaches that I just love being around every day. I really respect them. They work incredibly hard. They love young people. And we have a shared vision for what success looks like. And I think part of that is understanding that it's not just about winning and losing. We all get judged on that, ultimately. But that's not the end game in football. That's not the end game in coaching. I mean, it's just not. It can't be the only thing that matters. And our guys love young people. They want to have a positive impact on their lives. And we're completely aligned in that belief and that philosophy. And I try to work every day to create an environment where guys enjoy coming to work, where the players understand how important it is for our coaching staff to work together. And I think that permeates throughout the entire organization. And I think our players assimilate and do the same thing that they see our coaches do. There's never blaming the offense, there's never blaming the defense, there's never blaming special teams. It's all about trying to figure out a way to be successful together. Okay, philosophy. I think this is really important. You've got to have a philosophy that is built on a solid foundation. Okay? And so for me, as I said, I grew up an air raid guy. That's been what I do. It's kind of what I believe in. But I also believe in playing very physical football and running the football. okay? And I believe that you can be an air raid guy and continue to do those things. And again, you watch that championship game last night, you see those concepts all over the field. You know, you see a very simple offense on both sides of the ball that's execution-based. You know, it was so much fun last night to watch LSU. Okay, LSU won the game last night because they're really good at throwing pat and go. You know, and if you're an air raid guy, you know how important pat and go is. And you look at all those competitive throws and all those competitive catches that those players made last night, you know, it's pretty obvious to see that LSU has spent a lot of time with pat and go and has gotten really good at it. You know, the quarterback was throwing the ball on time, the quarterback was throwing the ball to space, the quarterback was holding the safeties with his eyes, and then he was giving receivers opportunities to make plays. Okay, and you watch that. I watched the recap of the game this morning, and they're talking about this guy did this guy did that. But when you sit back and you look at it, guys are making fundamental plays, and it just didn't happen. That was the result of a lot of work and a lot of time. And so you've got to have your foundation built on something. And for us, again, it's kind of been that air raid mentality, but we're going to play physical, we're going to play tough, we're going to block hard on the perimeter with our receivers, and we're going to try to make a quarterback-friendly offense. Okay, defensively for us, it's about creating turnovers. You know, I think that you've got to do a fantastic job of pairing your offense, your defense, and your special teams. Okay, and you know, when we're successful and we won games this year, you know, we won the turnover battle, we won the explosive play battle, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But the biggest thing that we did this year is we got off the field defensively by creating turnovers and having negative plays. And that allowed us to win some football games that we probably wouldn't have had an opportunity to win otherwise. You know, we play aggressively on defense. We are trying to get up the field. We're trying to create havoc in the backfield, and we're trying to create turnovers. And all that is critically important for us. And again, our offensive philosophy and defensive philosophy fit together. Our philosophy on special teams is the same thing. You know, we're kind of a high-risk outfit on special teams in some ways. We're really solid in the things that matter, you know, punt, you know, and we covered kickoffs well this year. If you saw us play, we lost the Memphis game because of a kickoff return. There was a game where we went into the game 8-0, and it was college game day, and they returned the second half kickoff for a touchdown. And that was really the big play in the game that changed it. But you go back and you look at our teams, we've been solid on special teams. You know, we cover kicks, we cover punts. We work really hard at being able to return kickoffs. We understand how important field position is, and so those are things that are big emphasis for us. But again, those things have to be in alignment. The philosophy has to be shared, and the philosophy has to fit together. Okay, it's got to do the same thing when it comes to recruiting. You know, I think that as we sit down and we start talking about who are we going to recruit, it's really, really important for us to make sure that these young men fit into our program and what we're trying to accomplish and how we're trying to accomplish it. Okay, and then the biggest thing I believe, and I think this is probably the most important thing to any kind of sustained success, is culture. You know, and people talk about culture all the time. It's a really hard word to define, you know, because it can mean a lot of different things. But I think what it means really is, what are the core values that you and your staff believe in? And I think it's important to sit around in a room and talk about those things. You know, what are we about? What are the foundations that we're going to build our program on? And we don't have a lot of slogans. I'm not a slogan guy. You know, we don't present 50 things to our team. That's not my thing. You know, I think that you speak really, really loudly with your actions. And for me, I'd rather our players see us every day, see how we interact with them, see how we interact with each other, and get a message that way as opposed to us telling them what we're going to do all the time. You know, I just believe that your actions speak much more loudly than your words do. And so we try to do it every day by how we treat our players, by how we interact with our players, and how we work together as a staff. And I think it carries over. Let me just say this. I think when you sit down and you say, again, what's really critically important, it doesn't matter what level of football that you're at. It doesn't matter if it's high school, it doesn't matter if it's the NFL, it doesn't matter if it's college, whatever it is. We all know how important players are. We all know how important culture is. I can't emphasize enough the importance of your strength and conditioning program. Okay? Everybody in this room has a strength and conditioning program. Okay? And some of them are going to be a lot better than others. And the thing that I think has to happen, and this has been great for me, Kaz Kazadi is our strength and conditioning coach at SMU. He's one of the best in football. And what he does an unbelievable job of, he gets guys bigger, stronger, faster, like every strength coach in the country does. But he's coaching their mind just as much as he's coaching their body. And he takes that job incredibly seriously. So what he and I do all the time is we say, okay, how do we need to improve as a football program? What do we need to do? And most of it is not, again, everybody's got to get bigger, stronger, faster. That's always going to be the answer. You know, but when we took the SMU job, the big thing that we needed to do, we needed to get bigger, okay? So we increased our nutrition. We addressed our nutrition all the time. We had weighed in, weighed out all the time. We provided more food. We raised money to give our guys more meals. We emphasized that. Okay, but the big thing we needed to do is we needed to get mentally and physically tougher. Okay, and what was that going to look like? How in the world were we going to get mentally and physically tougher from January until the time we started spring ball? And we needed to learn how to handle adversity. You know, I think the word on the street about SMU at that time was, hey, look, they'll play hard for a while. As soon as things get tough, they're gonna fold it up and they're gonna wilt. And so that was the word on the street. That's kind of what I had seen in my experience against SMU. And so that's the first thing we started to address. And so what I had to do is I had to give Kaz the keys to the car. I had to empower him. And I had to say, look, you need to create adversity in the weight room. And, and then we need to learn how to react to it. Okay, we can't just complain about our players aren't tough. They're not tough mentally. They're not tough physically. They can't deal with adversity. They don't have leadership. Well, we better figure out a way to address those issues. And so Kaz did an unbelievable job of creating obstacles in the weight room every single day for our players and making sure that they learned how to deal with those issues mentally. And so sometimes it was you get a third of the way through the lift, somebody turns the lights off in the weight room. Okay, sometimes it was you're playing music, the music stops. Sometimes it was playing bad music in the weight room. Sometimes it was no music in the weight room. Sometimes it was you get a third of the way through the workout and you start over. Sometimes it was you get to the very end of the workout and you start over. Whatever it was to create some kind of adversity and then program our players to move past that adversity, to get through it. To say, you know what, man, that's a bad deal, but I gotta focus, I gotta restart, we gotta go from here. And so that's something that he spends an unbelievable amount of time doing. And if you ask him, he's more of a mental coach than he is a physical coach. And as you all know, I mean, we're recruiting, we're meeting as a staff, we're doing all these things, but our strength and conditioning coaches day in, day out are around our players. So you've got to spend as much time as you can on alignment and empowering your strength and conditioning coach. Okay, again, the culture, in my opinion, is built in the weight room. It's built every single day in the weight room because that strength and conditioning coach is going to see your players 3 times as much as you do as a football coach. So empower them, make sure that they understand how important the mental aspect of the game are, and then grind and grind and grind the culture every single day. Okay, and again, it's all about toughness. You know, I don't care what anybody says, this is a tough game. You know, and it's not just physical toughness, it's mental toughness. It's the ability to withstand the ups and downs that happen during college football games. Very rarely do you have a football game that goes exactly as planned. You know, bad things happen in games. Turnovers happen, injuries happen. And then your players have to be able to deal with those things, process them, learn from them, and then move forward. And then again, the physical toughness part is something that you can address in the weight room as well. You know, it has to do with competition. It has to do with again, creating adversity, teaching guys that they're capable of more than they think they are. Continue to push them. all those different things that Kaz does for us, and it's had a huge impact on our program. Can't say enough about what he means to us. Okay, injury prevention. This is something that he talks about all the time. I think it's something that gets overlooked in strength and conditioning. How are we going to prevent injuries? What are we going to do to address that with our student athletes? What can we do to push them to the very brink, but at the same time take care of them? And there's so much technology now available with the GPS and all the different things that you can do to make sure that you're getting feedback on how far can you push them, but at the same time making sure that you don't get injured. And then doing creative things to ensure that they stay healthy and taking the input. He takes input from us, we take input from him. Our strength and conditioning coaches in our meetings, we're talking to him about fatigue, all the different things that are going on with our players. And again, he knows those things because he's spending time with them. And he can get information to you that you couldn't ordinarily get as a coach. The thing that your strength and conditioning coach can do too, we just talked about this briefly, is get the pulse of your team. He's the guy that knows what's going on. You know, he hears the players talking. He's in there on Monday morning when your guys have been out this weekend. Some of the guys went to a party, some incident happened, whatever it was, he can give you constant information about what's going on with your players. And that way you can get ahead of problems that can arise. And I think it's incredibly important to sit down and have these conversations with your strength coach. Hey, tell me what's going on with our guys. What's the pulse of our team? How are these guys feeling? What's going on? You know, and then try to address those issues and get ahead of them before something happens. And that's the one thing I've probably learned as much as anything else that I think is really critically important is get ahead of these things. You know, if you have an issue in your program, address it immediately. Don't stick your head in the sand. It's not going away. All it's going to do is get worse. And I think as a young coach, you know, you try to avoid those things. You don't want to deal with some of those problems. And I've learned through the years, deal with them as fast as you can, deal with them abruptly and swiftly, and get ahead of it before it becomes a big problem. Kaz also handles our discipline as well. I think that's incredibly important for him to do that. And then you have consistency across the board. And again, this is something from a culture standpoint we could sit here and talk about for hours. But you have to discipline your good players exactly the same way you discipline your bad players. There has to be a level of consistency. Everybody in the room is looking to see how people react when your starting quarterback shows up late, or your defensive tackle, or your starting corner, or one of the best guys on your team. You know, everybody's watching, and everybody's assuming that this guy's going to get treated differently than some walk-on. I think it's critically important that they are treated exactly the same. And I think that starts, again, in the weight room, and it starts with communication between your strength coach and the head football coach. Okay, you got to pay attention to trends. Really, really important. This game is a game of momentum and trends. And you got to pay attention to those things. What's going on with your players? And you got to have conversations. Why is this happening? Why are our guys weighing less than they weighed last week? Why are we starting to have more injuries? You know, why do we look tired? Why have we had 2 consecutive bad practices? You have to pay attention to trends, and you got to, again, try to figure out what in the world's going on and get it addressed. Another thing I think is really critically important, I think this is important for me as the head coach, it's really important for our staff members. You got to get around your players as much as possible in a non-football environment. You have to see those guys outside of football. You got to try to get them to your house. You got to try to get them to a bowling alley. You got to try to find them on campus. You got to sometime get in their dorm. Whatever it is, you got to be around them outside of the office, and you've got to get to know them. They'll talk to you more at the bowling alley than they will sit in front of you in your desk. And whatever the case may be, try to create some kind of opportunity to be around them, because they'll share information with you that's really critically important. And again, it's going to help you make all these decisions that I think are critical. You know, I try to do one-on-one informal meetings with guys. You know, hey, we might have a group that comes to my house. It may be the juniors. We're going to have a dinner at my house. I'm sitting on the back porch. I'll try to get 2 or 3 or 4 guys, you know, by themselves. You know, tell me what's going on. How are you doing? What's happening with our players? What's happening with this guy? Tell me about this incident. just to try to create as much information and gather as much information as you can so that you can address, again, issues before they arise. I try to call guys from time to time, just randomly call players on our team. Hey, man, how's it going? What are you up to? What are you doing? Tell me what's happening, just to try to gather as much information. You guys know, as you're a head football coach, sometimes you get isolated, and you really don't know what's going on inside of your program unless you're actively trying to figure it out on a day-to-day basis. I think you got to communicate with your non-football staff as much as possible. You have folks, whether it's a trainer, whether it's somebody, obviously, again, an assistant in strength and conditioning, whether it's somebody who's serving meals. We've got I talk to the people on our training table all the time. Tell me about our players. How are they doing? Have you guys had any issues with our players? What have you heard? How do we compare to other teams that you guys have worked with in the past? When we go on the road and travel, that's one of the things that I try to do is get information from that hotel staff. What were our players like compared to other teams that traveled here? Again, trying to find out what our strengths are and our weaknesses. It's off the field stuff, but again, it's incredibly important. You got to assimilate the information, you got to put it together, and then you got to be able to draw conclusions. And I think that's what all of this is about, is gather as much information as you can, try to see if it's a trend, and then draw conclusions and address those problems. And then I think this is what's critically important, is really you got to figure out what's important for your program. You know what I mean? You got to figure out what's important for your program. What's important for us at SMU is going to be different than what's important for Nick Saban in Alabama. We just have two different programs. I can't take Nick Saban's Alabama playbook, of how to run a football program, copy it, cross out Alabama, and bring it to SMU. That's just not going to work. They're two different programs, two different strengths, two different weaknesses, two different set of expectations, two different set of resources, all of those things. And so what I have to constantly do is build our SMU playbook. Not plays that we run, but how are we going to do things? How are we going to make our program successful? How are we going to build off our strengths? How are we going to address our weaknesses? And it's something that I'm constantly talking about and trying to do. I think this is one thing I've learned through the years, and it's something that we talk about as a coaching staff all the time. Things really aren't problems if you don't make them a problem. If you freak out when things start to happen, well, your coaches freak out, okay, the players freak out, everybody freaks out. And so what I've learned is, hey, look, if something arises, we're going to deal with it, but a lot of things aren't really that bad when they happen to you. You think at the time, well, this is really a bad deal, this is really hard. You got to just have an ability to move forward. Don't let it affect you. And I think you're constantly trying to teach your players to do that during a game, and then all of a sudden you as coaches are freaking out all the time. And so what those guys are doing, they're watching you and they're learning from you and they're applying what you're teaching. Mike Leach, I think, does a tremendous job of coaching. He's one of those guys who's been successful everywhere he's been. And I think one of the things that Mike used to talk to us all the time about at Texas Tech is you're either coaching it or you're allowing it. If you've got some kind of behavior problems with a player, if your guys aren't practicing hard, you're either coaching that or you're allowing it. And I think that day in, day out, you have to check yourself as a coach, and you have to make sure that you're not coaching that and you're not allowing that. And it's all about self-improvement and pushing and getting better. And again, I think we talk about this all the time, but details are really important, okay? Details are important, but you have to figure out which details ultimately matter. Because there's some things that are going to matter for your program that aren't going to matter as much for others. And you have to develop that kind of mentality, and you have to develop an understanding of who you are and what you are and how your approach is going to be. And then I think the big thing is, which details really make a difference. Which are the ones that are going to make a difference between winning and losing. Spend all your time on the things that are going to impact your ability to be successful. And spend very little time on the other things, the mundane things that can be frustrating, that can be challenging, but ultimately don't matter directly on your ability to be successful. Because as I said at the beginning, we all get judged on our ability to win football games, okay? But there's so much more that goes into it. You know, we want to make sure that, as everybody does in this room, I mean, we get in this business for no other reason than we love football and we want to be around young people and have a positive impact on their lives. I mean, there's no other way that anybody gets into football. With all the things that you have to do, all the moves you have to make, all the different things that you have to do as you go through this profession, if you don't love the game and you don't want to have a positive impact on people's lives, this is not the right profession for you. And there's been times where I wondered about myself. Is this the right profession for me? You know, as I said, when I got fired at Cal, I spent a year at TCU. The job things were starting to happen, you know, and I remember sitting in my office at TCU going, I wonder how hard it is to get a real estate license. You know, I remember doing that and thinking, I just don't know. I don't know if I can get back in. I don't know if I'm going to have an opportunity to do this, and I don't want to drag my 3-month-old son and my 8-year-old daughter and my 10-year-old daughter all over the country. You know, and I think that those things crept into my head a little bit, and then I had to check myself a little bit, and then all of a sudden some opportunities presented themselves, and I had a chance to go to SMU in my home state, a job that's always been appealing to me, and here we are a year later, and we had the best year in 35 years. And so, you know, we all go through those moments of doubt and self-doubt, but I think you always have to coach yourself, and you always got to remember what your mission is. And it's, again, not just about winning and losing, and it's not just about the logo you have on your shirt. One of the things we talk about all the time, too, I think it's critically important, you got to establish a standard, okay? You got to do it as the head coach. You have to do it as an offense, defense, and special teams unit, and then you have to do it as a position coach. Okay, what is our standard? What's the standard of play that we're looking for? What's the standard for us in practice? What's the standard for us when we walk into the classroom and we interact with our professors? What's the standard when we go on the road and somebody brings our food to us for a pregame meal? How do we interact with those people? And I think those are all things you've got to set those standards because they all matter. They're all important. And it's something that you have to do. You've got to establish that standard, and then you can never compromise the standard. You have to talk to your players every single day about it. And in my opinion, you have to approach it that way. This is what we want, and then I think you have to show them. You got to show them on video. You got to make reference to it. You have to allow them to be able to draw connections to that. And then you have to make sure that you never let them compromise that standard. And it's a daily struggle. You know, it's banging your head against the wall and continuing to do it every day because it's the right thing to do. And again, pay attention to trends in the game. I think you have to do that as a coach. You got to pay attention to trends in your program. You got to take a look around at what other people are doing. You got to study people outside of your conference, inside of your conference. What are they doing, not only schematically, but how are they doing recruiting? What's going on with their off the field staff? How are they utilizing people? All the different things the ways that you can improve. You have to go study people. You got to come back, and then you got to assimilate that information, and then you got to try to see, will this fit into our program? Does this make sense for us? Okay, and I think all of us want to go visit Clemson. You know, all of us want to go there and see what they're doing and how they're doing it, whatever. But I think it's important for us to look at teams that consistently overachieve and go spend some time with those guys. Go spend some time with Dave Clawson at Wake Forest. How in the world is he having the success he's having at Wake Forest? You know, those guys that have overcome things and have been successful through the years at different places that aren't the natural powers in college football. You know, those are the guys that you can get the most from. You know, I think that again, learning from Hal Mumme and Mike Leach, I think one of the biggest things I learned was to keep it simple. I'll tell you a quick story at Kentucky. I get a GA job. We put together a game plan over the summer. We go into our first game. We're going to play Louisville when I was at Kentucky, all right? And so we spend all this time game planning in the spring. We put these scripts together in the summer. We give them to our players. They run the scripts all summer. You know, we've got this big package of plays. We come up with this big game plan. We're rolling out the air raid in the SEC, okay? Well, we have an open field script, and on that open field script, we had 7 plays. Okay, we had 2 third and short plays. We had 2 third and long plays. We had 4 red zone plays. We had 2 goal line plays, and we had a 2-point play. Okay, and that was it. So when we got the kickoff, the opening kickoff, we went down our 7-play script. Okay, I think we had a 7-play drive, went in and scored. Got the ball back, you know what we did? We started over with play number 1. Okay, I think we scored in about 4 plays. We got the ball back, we went to play number 5. Went 5, right through it all over again. And what our players can do is they could execute it and they had confidence. So I think I learned a really important lesson. I mean, I remember sitting at Hal, looking at Hal thinking, this dude's lost his mind. I mean, we're not going to make it through a year here. They're going to run us out of here so fast, it's going to make our head spin. But I learned how important it was to execute. And at the end of the day, that's what football is about. It's about execution. It goes back to the game last night. Again, why did LSU win? Because they're good at pat and go. I mean, I believe that. You know, when I get home, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get the tape of that game, and I'm going to go through there, and I'm going to pull off every pat and go throw. I'm going to show it to our players, and I'm going to say, look, here's a quarterback throwing the ball on time with air. Here's a wide receiver squeezing a route, and here's a wide receiver catching the ball over his outside shoulder, separating late. And this is the reason they won the national championship right here, because they're good at pat and go. And yeah, they got good players, no doubt about it. I mean, they got great players. But those great players were able to execute because you could tell, man, they practice it. They emphasize it. And that's what allowed them to win the national championship. I believe that. You got to develop a system you believe in. Okay, you just have to find something that you believe in, and you got to go all in with that system. Okay, and remember this, the game's about the players. Okay, it's not about coaches. This game is about the players. In critical situations, think players, not plays. Okay, very important that you do that. Always players over plays, like I just said. And then I believe execution is the key to winning at the end of the day. Doesn't matter what I know, it matters what our players can execute. And it matters how hard they play. You know, that's the one thing about it is if you can get your guys to play hard consistently, you will have an opportunity to win every single time you step on the field. Every time, if you can get them to play hard consistently. And then again, you got to develop specific drills to help in critical aspects of the game. Okay, you got to coach drills to the standard, like we've talked about. And then you got to figure out what the difference is off the field. You know, what can we do off the field that's going to make a difference for our program? Okay, and again, when you go back and you look at college football, okay, there are really 2 factors in winning and losing football games. Okay, if you can win these 2 things right here, you win a football game 92% of the time. Okay, if you can win the battle of explosive plays and you can win the turnover battle, those 2 things, 92% of the time, you're going to win the football game. Okay, so what you have to do is you got to figure out, okay, that's great, but what does that mean? How can I do that? How can I make sure that we do those 2 things? Well, you can teach and practice ball security. You can teach and practice creating turnovers defensively. And then you've got to teach and practice explosive plays. And what I mean by that, again, is one-on-one plays. How do you get good at one-on-one plays? You know, I think you get good at it, pat and go. All right? How can you limit explosive plays defensively? It's all about tackling, and it's all about being in good position. It's about alignment, assignment, technique, and finish. Okay? And then you got to try to figure out how can we create and limit explosive plays on special teams. All right? And then critical plays. I think you have to say, we got to spend time on critical plays. And what I mean by that is, 2-point plays. Okay? You know, we were 7 for 7 this year on 2-point plays. And that allowed us to win a couple of football games that we probably shouldn't have won because we spent a lot of time in the offseason talking about what do we want to do in these critical plays, in these critical situations in this game. Okay? And again, 2-point play. What's the philosophy? You know, going back to players over plays, and I think 2-point plays are a little different. It's all about the players, but it's also about showing something that's a little bit different maybe than what you normally do. Okay? It's all about the element of surprise. It's all about some kind of change in formation. And again, what I was going to do is show you 2-point plays, but I've run out of time here, all right? So again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. You know, it means a lot to me to have a chance to to speak to a group of coaches that I just have a tremendous amount of respect for. You know, I love the game of football. I love this profession. I'm incredibly blessed that I've had a chance to do it for 27 years of my life. You know, I'm in an unbelievable place. You know, I can't say enough about the opportunity to be at SMU. It's a fantastic institution, but the best thing that we have going for us is we have really incredible people. You know, our coaches, our players, it's a joy to go to work with those guys every day, and it's a real privilege to have a chance to be here with all of you today. And we get to do the greatest job in the world, and that's to be a football coach. You know, I can't tell you how much I grew up respecting coaches and what it means to me to have a chance to be in this profession every single day. So we're all lucky to be here. We're all lucky to be a part of this great game. And again, I appreciate your time. Please come see us at SMU. We're an open book. We love to sit down. We love to talk football. We love to learn. And we'll certainly give you any information that you ever want from us. So I appreciate everything you guys do for young people. And again, it's a real honor to have a chance to speak to you today. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Inside the Headset. If you heard anything on this episode that you would like to learn more information about, head over to afcapodcast.com, where you can find every episode and all of the corresponding show notes. While you're there, take a second to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for the show, please let us know by sending an email to podcast@afca.com. Make sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at Inside the Headset and tag it when you share each episode. You can stay up to date with all things AFCA by following the @WeAreAFCA Twitter account. Every episode of Inside the Headset can also be found on your favorite audio streaming platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. If you are not currently a member of the AFCA, be sure to find us online at afca.com and apply to join over 10,000 NFL, college, and high school coaches from around the country who are striving to be the best they can be. With an AFCA membership, you gain invaluable access to the annual AFCA convention, the bi-monthly magazine, and the new and improved digital library, which contains thousands of videos and articles contributed by hundreds of current and former football coaches. You can also visit afcainsider.com to sign up for our free weekly email newsletter on the right-hand side of the screen. It comes out every Tuesday at lunch and is filled with great articles and stories written by many of the same coaches you hear on the podcast. It's geared to help you become a better coach tomorrow than you are today. Be sure to connect with me on Twitter at Coach Mario Price. And remember, the AFCA is not just an annual convention. It is an association that continually promotes education, guidance, and networking. But it is also so much more than that. The AFCA is about celebrating the past and educating the future. It is about developing great coaches who will produce great teams and even better people. So invest in your skill set and impact today by engaging with the AFCA.